Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy 24/7 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy 24/7 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy 24/7 podcast.
Man, Joe, I feel like we're back in Memorial after that. Big thanks to Chris Freeman there for the intro. And unfortunately, Vanderbilt has lost to Missouri by a final of 75-66. Alongside Joey Dwyer, I'm Billy Derrick, and we are here to recap that matchup. And Joey, as I find the sponsor read, I'm going to give it to you for your thoughts on this one. Obviously, tough loss for Vanderbilt. They fought back, but ultimately not enough. Missouri hit a couple of huge threes there late. Vanderbilt turned the ball over a couple of times in a row with Hogard and Edwards, but just your thoughts on what you witnessed there tonight.
Yeah, you don't want to make too much of an early January game, but that feels like a real missed opportunity for them. That was one of 6 non-ranked games they're going to play in all of SEC play. And I get it's a road game against a team who I think is pretty good. I think they're a lot better than the road game that they played last week, but man, that's a game that makes, if you win that game, it makes your road a lot easier the rest of the way. They probably got to get to 7 or 8 wins, and now you're thinking that probably has to include 2 or 3 ranked wins and maybe more than that. Billy, that's a tough spot to be in if you're Vanderbilt, and I think they made it a lot harder on themselves today. Down the stretch, I thought they really stormed back, like we kind of talked about on Tuesday. Made it really hard on themselves early. They went down 17 today. They were down 22 on Tuesday. Seemed to have a knack for the comeback a little bit, but Billy, I wrote about this, and that lead that was 1 to 4 to 5 points throughout the entirety of the second half. You know how there's those magnets that have the like sides and they kind of just push away from each other. They can get close, but they can never touch. It just felt like they were never going to get over that hump. That team is too old, and they're at home, and they know how to get it to the finish line. And at this point, I'm not quite sure that Vanderbilt does. I think Vanderbilt's good and does know how to win in some senses, but man, that team was just too much for them in that moment. I thought that was the first glimpse of real SEC athleticism they saw outside of Tuesday. They turned it over 14 times. Missouri had 19 points off turnovers, and I thought in a lot of ways beat Vanderbilt at its own game. It had more rebounds. It had more second chance points, had the same amount of points off turnovers. The free points are starting to dry up a little bit for this team, and I think that's a big negative indicator for them down the stretch. They're going to have that battle go their way throughout a lot of the season, and they didn't today. And that specifically doesn't work when you're not making shots like they weren't in the first half, and you're giving Mizzou way too many easy ones like they were as well.
Want to go ahead and get to our sponsor for basketball season, the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, and cleaned laundry ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today to get your time back. With us being live on YouTube, feel free to fire away any questions or comments you've got. We'll do our best to field them. We'll probably go for another 15 minutes or so talking about this game, maybe a little bit longer. But, Joey, it was an awful start, right? I think we can agree on that. Missouri, it was also a lot due to Missouri. They started 5 of 5 from the field. They opened the game on an 11-0 run. I thought a big part of that first half, Chris Magnon was open a few times, like wide open for threes, and doesn't shoot it. Now, he started shooting them, made a couple of threes, and I think that's going to be a key for this team because he's open. Teams are leaving him open. I made note of that I think he's got to start shooting those wide open threes more often. I know coming into this game, he's only a 24% three-point shooter. That'll go up a bit tonight with his makes, but I did note that. Jason Edwards obviously struggled in the early going. but got it going. I mean, he leads the team in scoring. And in terms of him defensively, matchup-wise on Grill, that was tough late. I mean, I thought they went to Grill consistently late there on Edwards. AJ Hogard there in in that first half specifically, obviously struggled for a lot of the game tonight, but he obviously double dribbled there. If you remember that, Joey got away with it, found Tyler Nickel for a huge three. I thought that was the beginning of the late momentum in the first half. MJ Collins had a big three with just over a minute left in that first half. They closed the half on a 7-0 run. And Joey, I mean, if Hogard hits that floater at the buzzer, you're looking at a 7-point game. But a lot of that first half didn't matter. Vanderbilt clawed back into the game. But you said that 1, 2, 3, 4-point deficit, they could never tie it. Vanderbilt trailed the entire game. And really, it was a bad start to the second half, too. I thought Missouri was getting way too many easy baskets. The defense for Vanderbilt did get a lot better in the second half. They started getting points in transition. They got Missouri out of their comfort zone. Jalen Carey had that big three with just under 13 minutes to play on a 9-0 run for Vanderbilt. And honestly, a lot of it was Missouri. I thought they made some mistakes late. With some silly turnovers and missing free throws. I thought they did allow Vanderbilt to stay in it. But an underrated player for the Commodores tonight, Joe, in my mind, is MJ Collins. I mean, I thought he was big down the stretch. I know it didn't result in a win, but there are still some good things from this team tonight. Magnon had a huge three there with 5.5 left. And then you had that huge three from Hogard with 3.5 to play. But after that, it was the grill show. I mean, he had that backdoor cut like you tweeted, Joey, and they were just isolating Connor Grill on Jason Edwards. And it turned into a little bit of a ref show late. There was I thought that call from Edwards on Grill was awful. I didn't even think Edwards touched him there. And then there was another bad one on Edwards. He misses the next 2 free throws, and I guess you could say ball don't lie there. But those are some of my thoughts. And ultimately, this team is still a good team, but the SEC is elite. I mean, this is the best the conference has ever been, and we're seeing the limitations of this team. I think you said it right, Joey, that Missouri was going to do whatever it took to win this game late. They were at home. They're an old team. And I don't think there was a whole lot else. Now, Vanderbilt could have done a lot of things better. I thought they could have rebounded better. But, credit Missouri. They knew they needed that game, and they got it. And, it was that feeling of you knew they weren't going to lose it a little bit, which is a tough feeling for Vandy fans.
It's especially hard to feel like they're not going to lose it with what Vanderbilt got from its stars. AJ Hogard was 3 for 15 from the field. Jason Edwards had 20 points and was better at times, but man, did he have a rough end of the game. He got backdoored by Grill, one possession and fouled him. The next possession fouled him on the three. Whether people think that's a three or not is not in my jurisdiction. And then you look at the next possession, misses the 2 free throws, misses a layup the possession after that. Man, he just had a brutal last minute or so of the game. And when Hogard and Edwards are combining to do those 2 things, and even Edwards had that one live ball turnover right before Hogard had his. Really hard to win games that way, and Mizzou's guys stepped up. Caleb Grill was excellent in the last minute or so. It was a really tough matchup for Edwards, not one that I think is super favorable for him a lot of the time. You will have to say that Edwards looked a lot healthier and looked better today. I don't think Vanderbilt's in that game without him, so we don't want to put it all on his shoulders, but their guys have to be guys down the stretch, and they weren't today. And another thing, too, I thought Missouri kind of cracked the code on how to stop Vanderbilt at times. You look at the zone. Vanderbilt plays way too many of those lineups where you've got a few non-shooters on the court. They had Huffman and Magnon on the court at once. They had Carey on the court with them at one point. And even the guys they have complementing them aren't like knockdown guys. And Mizzou played a zone and got Vanderbilt to basically run that lineup off the floor. And then when they came out of that lineup, Mizzou just put a ton of ball pressure on them. And I thought Vanderbilt really struggled with some longer athletes, obviously turned it over 14 times. Tyler Tanner turning it over, I think, was pretty fitting in this game because this felt like maybe the most loose Vanderbilt had been with the ball all year. Maybe not that it was necessarily loose, but it was forcing us doing some things that it hadn't done throughout a lot of the year. And I thought that was one of the stories of the day. Vanderbilt's recipe for winning was kind of cracked today, and I thought Mizzou beat them at its own game at times. That was a big story for me today. And I just don't know how often Vanderbilt's going to be able to not have that be the story and overcome that. Today feels like kind of a shift because Tuesday you were talking about just one game, things along those lines. now this team has some adversity, and after South Carolina, it's going to have to fight that adversity in its toughest stretch of the year and try to escape from teams that are way better than this Missouri team.
Good point here from Willie. First 3 minutes of each half, Missouri 17, Vandy 3. Vanderbilt didn't start the game well, and they didn't start the second half well. And I think that is, you dig yourself a hole, Joey. They dug themselves a hole against Mississippi State. You could even argue there against LSU in that LSU game, there were some holes that they dug. They've been able to dig out of them a good bit, but a lot of tonight's loss and the Mississippi State loss was the hole was big, and you had to dig out of it there. Credit to them for fighting. We're not questioning the fight in this team. I think we can both agree there, Joey, but we're questioning what this team has at their disposal. Missouri, they bring in Mark Mitchell from Duke. He's got 19 points tonight. Was just a massive part of what they wanted to do. Grill is a guy kind of like Tyler Nickel. I don't think Grill is anything. He's a good player, but Missouri did a better job of getting him open. They had a better matchup on him with Edwards. I take that matchup all day. I would have done the same exact thing that Missouri did late in that game. Their guards played pretty well. I thought Robinson was really good. And, Tamar Bates is one of their better players. Vanderbilt held him in check somewhat. Perkins only had 5. But you look at Vanderbilt, I think you got to get more from Nickel, who's a starter for you. You only had 3 points, only shot 2 threes. He had a wide open look there from 3, and it's almost like the announcers talked about it, Joey. They were it's almost looked like he was a little shocked that he was even that open for that 3 there. Hoggard only 9 points, but you get 20 from Edwards, and you're like, okay, this should at least be a close game, and it was for a lot of the second half. But I think you need more from Nickel, and you got to have more from Carey. The margins, we're realizing the margins are small. And honestly, Joey, they're getting smaller, it seems like. Now, they're deep. This is still a deep team, and I'm not hitting the panic button per se, but the more these games go, and we'll learn a lot about this team against South Carolina too. Similar style team to Missouri, not as straight-up talented maybe as Missouri, but got to get more from Nickel, and you got to get more from Carey, Joey. I think that's what I learned tonight. Even though you still got 20 from Edwards and 13 from Collins, those Nickel threes, you're going to need at least 3, maybe even 4 threes a night against these really good SEC teams from Nickel, I think, because you're not going to – I know you got a couple from Magnon, but that's not going to be the case typically.
I think we've talked about it all along as if they've had a ton of depth, and I think they do have a lot of really capable guys. I'm not sure they have a ton of guys on their roster that you can rely on to give them the same thing every night. It feels like they have too much variability between down from Edwards until the end of their rotation. Hoggard, I think, can pretty consistently handle the ball for you, and it will put up some numbers, but tonight he went 3 for 15,
and he's doing a lot. He's having to do a lot.
He's having to do more than he should probably, because there's other guys on the roster who I think have underperformed in some ways as well. So I think Mark Byington has started to realize that maybe he doesn't have the up and down roster that I think a lot of people thought they had. And I think we always knew that there were going to have to be some performances from this group that were uncharacteristic for them to get a game like this. And it's probably not time to hit the panic button. I don't think we're there yet. They're 1-2 in the league. They gotta win they got a game they're probably going to be favored in on Wednesday against South Carolina, but it's a gauntlet after that. And if you're going to win games like that, like you said, you got to have better performances from Tyler Nickel. You got to have more efficient performances from Hoggard. You can't have 3 turnover performances from McLaughlin, and you can't have Edwards making plays like that down the stretch. So I think they're fine. I think they're going to be able to win some games they shouldn't still. I don't think it's time for the panic button, but today was not the recipe for them. You can't continue to dig yourself holes like they did, and you certainly can't not get enough from Hoggard and Nickel and expect to win consistently. That's not the recipe, and especially not when McLaughlin and Carey combined for 9 points and kind of look outmatched, and the whole team looks out physical as well.
You had a good line there, Joey, having to do more than he should. I think we have to say that about too many players. I think Hoggard's having to do more than he should. I'd say Chris Magnon in a lot of ways is having to do more than he should. I say he should shoot more, but that's just they need it because he's wide open a lot, but teams are leaving him wide open because he's not a shooter. Right?
Yeah,
I know he hit a couple
last year too at Cornell.
Right. So that's who he is. He's having to do when I say he needs to hit those, well, he's having to do more than he should, and really that he can at times. I think, you could say that about Carey. You can say that about McLaughlin. The guys, part of me feels for McLaughlin. Like he's done a good job, I think, but he's not as big as a post player. Keyshawn Murphy at Mississippi State. He's not as maybe athletic as a Mark Mitchell. He's done fine, but even McLaughlin might be having to do more than he should. And I'm not saying I'm stunned that we're saying that, but that's kind of a common theme here with this team that I think we're both realizing that a lot of these guys are probably playing above themselves, which can be possible. These guys can get better, but in the SEC, you're going to get exposed for that, and I think they have a little bit. I know they're 1-2, still got 13 wins on the season, but things can change quickly in the SEC, like you've talked about.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of that is anybody's fault in particular. It's year one with the roster. They've completely had to revamp. I'm not saying that's a slight on Mark Byington and the team he's built or any individual guy. It's just, man, it's tough to build a roster of 13 new guys, especially when you don't have the guy you're relying on to be a rotational big. Again, that's put more pressure on Carey and McLaughlin. And then Hemingway being out has put more pressure on Nickel and even guys like Huffman and Hogard in a sense because they don't have a guy to dump it off to once in a while. That's a thing. And then you're using one of those spots on a redshirt freshman and Karis Bilal as well. So they're really relying on a lot of guys that I don't know would be relied upon as much in year 2 or year 3. At least kind of that's the hope for Mark Byington for this program. He's built a competitive roster, but I think you're starting to see kind of like Chris Beard built with Ole Miss last year. He built a team as best he can, but there's obviously some deficiencies in it. And we're going to talk more about next year a lot throughout the stretch, especially if it continues to go the way it has this week. But I think as it's currently constructed, we kind of talk about limited teams, and that's what this team is. It doesn't mean they can't make some noise and win some games they should, and I still think that's a real possibility. They have some edge. They have veterans. They don't turn it over a whole lot. They do have some recipes to be able to win. They have kind of the peripheral signs of a good team, but you're starting to see now what we talked about throughout all of non-conference play. It's going to get a lot more difficult, and Billy, it certainly has.
Vanderbilt loses 75-66 at Missouri in Columbia. Up next Wednesday night, they host South Carolina at 5:00. Early tip-off. I don't love that tip-off time, but in a lot of ways, it's better than 8:00 at the same time,
so much
too.
Better.
So that'll be on the SEC Network, 5:00. Vanderbilt and South Carolina. Joey, I'll leave it to you to close it out with your final thoughts after this loss and then heading into Wednesday night against South Carolina.
Yeah, not time to hit the panic button, I don't think by any means. The Mizzou's a good team. I think as a team that has engineered one of the best turnaround stories in college basketball after going 0-18 last year. They're good, but they're going to see better teams, right? You're even looking at Ole Miss on the TV right now. I think I see it in your reflection too, Billy. Ranked 23rd in the country, Vanderbilt's going to see teams like that, like Auburn, like Tennessee, and it's going to get more difficult down the stretch. We always knew that, though, and I think the progress they've made is remarkable for the situation they were put in, but you're starting to see some of the holes in what they've had to build and the way they've had to build it. So it's up to this team and for Mark Byington to get the most out of this team the rest of the way. But today, again, it shows you they're going to struggle with a lot of what they've seen. And even this week does. They're going to see long athletic teams every game. They're going to see good guards every game. And they're going to have to find solutions to do that. I think the free points are going to start to dry up a little bit relative to what they saw in non-conference play. And that's another thing that I think has been kind of under talked about. So, Billy, it's going to be a hard road for them the rest of the way, but I don't think we necessarily learned anything new today. We knew it was going to be a hard road. We knew this was going to be a hard game for them, and they just didn't come out with a way to win. I think they've got to get out to faster starts, and that's a big thing as well. But I'm not panicking about the state of this team. I'm not panicking about the state of Mark Byington's coaching job or anything along those lines. But I do think you're starting to see some of the flaws in the way this team is built, and you probably start to see them a little bit more as they go into that tough stretch with 4 ranked games. So, Billy, we'll talk soon.
Yeah, Wednesday is going to be a battle. I think we need to throw that out there as well. South Carolina is 0-3, Vanderbilt 1-2. Both teams will be desperate. That's a must win for both teams if they want. Well, I don't even know if South Carolina has dug themselves a hole in the tournament, but I think Vanderbilt's still alive, of course, and got to win Wednesday. Saturday, you host Tennessee, who is number 3 in the net right now, and then you travel to Alabama, who is number 8 in the net right now. Then you host Kentucky, who's number 18 in the net. So the next three out of the four next 4 games, pretty brutal. Welcome to the SEC if you're Vanderbilt.
Billy, Mark Byington will be proud of you for using the AP or the net instead of the AP poll. I'll tell him that.
I would never. Yeah, we'll make sure we tell him that on Wednesday. That's Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick. And again, thanks to Chris Freeman for the new intro. Hope you guys enjoy that. And we will see you next week. Joey will be joining. What day did I say? Did I say Thursday next week?
Wasn't it? Was it Tuesday and Thursday? I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. You'll hear from Joey next week at some point. But that's Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick. Thanks for watching and listening to another episode of the Vandy 24/7 podcast.